Welcome to another Thursday with Third Path webinar. So happy to be here with you. I'm DeGroot from Third Path Institute, and we've been running these Thursday webinars for so long before we could even do it with visual, just audio. We're glad you're here today because one of the things we've learned is this webinar is a special webinar, a chance for you, our participants, to really join in the conversation. So towards the end of the webinar, you'll hear more about this. We hope you'll stay for the whole thing and share your thoughts on how we can better support wellness. One of our wonderful guests today is Kyra Cavanaugh. I've known her forever, back when those big, huge boys of hers were young ones, and I've always been impressed with Kyra's work. She's also got some great books out there, something she wrote a long time ago called Who Works Where and Who Cares? It's a great book that was, made for the pandemic because it really was helping us understand something that many needed to learn when the pandemic hit, that we really can work in very different ways. You'll also be hearing more about her book, 100 Ways to Wellbeing, a little later in the webinar. I wanted to start by reminding people that if you listened to the October and November webinars that we've done, you would have learned that we really can create a whole person workplace, a workplace that really supports us to be great at work and have time to really live full lives. What you would learn in those webinars is that how you do that really kind of depends on the job you do. Some jobs you have to be physically present. You can't work remotely. It also depends on the person. Some people don't want to work remotely. And that there is flexibility that's important, part of our answers for an integrated life, but there's also capacity management. Capacity management is the idea that whether you work 20 hours a week, 40 hours a week, 60 hours a week, there's always more work to do. And if you want to live an integrated life, you've got to learn how to set some effective boundaries around your work so you have time and energy for life. In fact, that's what we're going to be looking at today in particular. We're going to be looking at work-life integration and wellness. And there's something that's been going on for a long time where people have kind of thought about work-life balance as a dirty word. And I want to talk more about these two different concepts. I've always seen integration as how we want to incorporate work and other life priorities over the course of our life. So it's a goal we're committing to for the long run. Whereas balance is how you feel in the moment. And our bodies give us really good information if we're willing to stop and pay attention. So if you're feeling out of balance, it's because something's going on where you've got too much work, too much life responsibilities, and change is required. Maybe just a little change or maybe a big change. Either way, if we want to live an integrated life and have time and energy for our life priorities, we've got to set some boundaries and get smart about setting boundaries. Otherwise, work-life integration can be really challenging. We're shooting for that battery on the left, where you have time for family work, time for paid work, time to recharge, versus that overflowing glass of water on the right, where it feels like we've got too much work, too much life responsibilities, and everything's feeling exhausting. Luckily, in the Third Path community, we've learned from a lot of people about how to make this work. And from their experiences, we can share these insights with you. And what we've learned over and over again, it's their commitment to their lives outside of work that they actually then became smarter around how to do their work. So when Michelle, one of my board members, wanted to figure out how to take most of her summers off and create this flex year solution, she learned how to think smarter about how to set up her direct reports to be able to better manage the work in the summers when she really cut back at work. In fact, she did such a good job training those people. They were often, picked up for other projects once they were so well skilled from Michelle's training. So there really is often some benefits to us and our organizations when we really think differently about committing to our lives outside of work. I argue today, and of course you've got some experts who might add their own opinions, that in order to get to this integrated approach, we need to think about 5 things: the right amount of work, the strategic use of technology. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Getting lots and lots of support. Oh my goodness, could I talk about that? And it's developing some really important integration skills. We actually have a really cool overwhelm mitigation group that Karen Salinas, who you'll hear from later, helps us run. And it's a place where we are helping you develop those integration skills. Most importantly, and I'm sure we're going to hear this over and over again, it's our personal clarity that helps us stay on track with our work-life integration and wellness goals. The last thing I want to say, that point I make in the bottom says, keep in mind some activities can be energizing versus depleting. We'll probably circle back to this later in the webinar. It's the idea that sometimes you can spend 15 minutes on something and it wipes you out for the whole day. Sometimes you can spend 15 minutes on something and you're energized to keep on going. And that's just the truth about different activities in our lives and how they tap our energy. You've heard a little bit about my thinking around these ideas. Kyra, I'm so glad you're here today. Tell us your experiences around these ideas. You run a great business. It's really helping people think about this stuff. And you've got some history that led you up to this business. So tell me a little bit about where your ideas came from and where you are today with some of these ideas.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And so nice to be with all of you. I'm a waver. I used to be a hugger. I can't hug anymore, so I wave. Hopefully you're all waving back at me. It's nice to be with all of you. So yes, I didn't come upon any of this without a huge amount of suffering and sacrifice, doing it a whole bunch of different ways until I finally figured it out. So I had a corporate career in the food industry. I'm out of Chicago. In Chicago for 20 years, and then hit my midlife crisis at 40. Wanted to be part of the solution, which to me at the time felt like flexibility in the workplace. Left my food industry career and started in this work-life HR learning and development world, and I knew nothing. None of my roles had prepared me for that kind of work. And so then the recession happened, and I spent years doing lots of informational interviews and planting lots of seeds and figuring out what role I wanted to play in this important effort we're all involved in. And Jessica, I think that's somewhere in the midst of all that is when you and I met. And what I learned through all of that research and all of those informational interviews in such dark days during the Great Recession was that there are so many aspects to this issue and so many players and so many roles we all can play. So we all have chosen kind of different aspects of the big issue. And so where I've chosen to focus, I started out back in the old days with my focus on virtual work and how to work remotely, how to work part-time, how to work in all those different flexibility modes. And I fundamentally believe that we can be good parents, we can be good community members, we can be good family members, and we can be really good at our work. And back in those days, it felt like a zero-sum game, like we had to make choices. And I just didn't believe that. So I trained for a very long time, leaders, organizations to put flex policies in place and managers to learn how to manage flexible and virtual teams. Well, little did we know, back in those days, nobody wanted to talk to me during a networking event. They were like, okay, good luck with that crazy idea. And now it's everywhere. It's just part of our vernacular. So a few years ago, I thought, you know what I want to do? I really, really, really want to focus on well-being and try to figure out that puzzle. Because what I was noticing was when we work in hybrid and virtual ways, and we're seeing this in such intensity now, we can't monitor as easily each other's well-being. And the lines between work and home life and personal life start to blur. And so I just anticipated that we were going to be struggling with the kinds of things we're struggling now. So my focus really is on the workplace and the role that the workplace plays, the way that leaders may sort of define work the heroics and sacrifice that are expected in the workplace. So right now, the work I'm doing is with executive leadership teams to talk about, where did your ideas and expectations around work come from? What are the norms and processes and expectations that impact negatively well-being in your workplace? And here's the headline. What teams are realizing is that the same inefficiencies, issues, biases that they bring to, that we all bring, so many of us, to the workplace for the benefit of performance, actually don't benefit performance, they don't benefit well-being. Inefficiencies equally impact both. And when they have that awareness, fireworks, because then well-being isn't this strange concept or this extra or this soft, squishy, hippie thing. It's actually, I had a leader say to me, wait a second, we know how to solve performance issues. And I'm like, yes. Well, when you solve performance issues with well-being as part of your focus, then you're playing in your strength and you're impacting everybody's well-being in positive ways. So that's what's really been exciting for me lately.
Wow. I haven't actually had you update me on this kind of framing recently. And I think that way you're saying it is just, honestly, Kyra, I feel like I am thinking differently now that I'm listening to you. So what we've been talking about is this idea that you've really kind of articulated so well, which is framing the workplace from a wellness perspective. It's something that Third Path's been fighting for a long time, which is when you encourage people to live a well life, a whole life, an integrated life, a life where they feel like they're not choosing a win-lose option. When they come and they can be themselves and feel good about their whole selves, everything else at work improves. And so that makes a lot of sense to frame it from a wellness perspective. There's something else that you said, though, that I want to underscore. Something early you said. I'm going to blank it. But it's the idea that remote work requires a special paying attention to this. A hybrid organization or a remote organization requires, we needed to pay attention to wellness no matter where we were, but there's something unique about remote work and a hybrid organization around wellness, perhaps, that's going on too. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I'm curious to hear what you're thinking there.
Yeah, so where well-being, mental well-being, physical well-being, organizations took a benefits approach, right? So once a year around this time, you had to kind of figure out, like, okay, maybe you have a fitness subsidy and do you want to get resistance bands or weights? Maybe you need to sign up for a new insurance plan. And the first thing you do, if you're like me, is go and look for the mental health benefits, right? How many therapist sessions am I going to be able to get for me and my family this year? So employers and us as employees, I think, saw well-being as this transactional thing. Get your 10,000 steps in. Let's have a Biggest Loser contest. And that we all knew, everyone on this call, please type into chat if you disagree with me, but we all knew that wasn't enough. We all knew we were having very complicated lives and relationships with our mental well-being, with our spiritual well-being, with our emotional well-being, all of that being challenged now, especially during COVID. Now, the second pandemic that experts have identified is the psychological pandemic, the mental health pandemic. So now it's no longer this thing that can be sort of, I'll just say, marginalized as a benefit over here. So COVID has elevated not only physical safety concerns, obviously, but emotional, energetic, mental health kinds of concerns as well. So it's no longer this, there's still stigma, let's be honest, but employers are having to look at it. It's an oncoming train that they are understanding impacts whether people stay or go, impacts their bottom line, impacts the way people are showing up, if they show up at all. People are being hired and then not showing up in the workplace. So the power shift we're already seeing starting to happen with the Great Resignation. when we look at the reasons behind this, and McKinsey did has a really interesting graph that illustrates the distinction between what employers think are the reasons that people are leaving and what employees are saying are the reasons that they're leaving. And guess what? It's all the stuff we've always talked about, Jessica, about belonging, about feeling valued by the organization and by other people at work. So yes, we have the responsibility to grow our agency, our ability to talk about what we need, to ask for what we need. But we all know that the systems have made it very, very, very difficult to be courageous without fear of retribution, right? Even the best employers in our country, there are still thousands of people that work in those organizations who are afraid to ask or to say they're going to unplug on vacation, who are afraid to say, my child is suicidal. I work with a leader right now. His team literally does not know that both of his daughters have been suicidal in the last year because he's afraid of what they'll think. So we have so much more work to do. But right now, what we all recognize is that employers have to change. And the labor movement, all of the shifts that we're seeing and the power shifting back to labor is going to help do that. And us building the agency, like you teach us, Jessica, to do that, is also going to make a huge difference. And then employers being hit in their pocketbooks, which we always knew, Jessica, how many times we had that conversation, that there has to be a financial implication and understanding that has to be part of that shift. So it's this storm that sort of has lots of parts coming together.
Yeah. And I told Kyra ahead of time that, because she's talking so really about how the organizations influence us. And that is the truth. We joke at Third Path that in some ways we focus on the growing 20% or the growing 30% because so many people are working in organizations that are really hostile to some of the ideas that Third Path's been promoting. That doesn't mean we don't want to keep on supporting you. But, even in a supportive workplace, I've also learned that these ideas of trying to reach for an integrated life where we feel like we're living our whole lives well can be challenging. So I asked Kyra ahead of time, and I'm going to share some insights myself first, so not to put her on the spot. But, I want to remind people that there is a skill set, there is a mindset that is part of what needs to happen. Your agency is an important part of the equation. And so today's webinar is going to talk a little bit about what we can do, what our agency is for reaching for wellness. And that includes maybe leaving where you're working if where you're working isn't really supporting you to be the person you need to be, which, by the way, a lot of people are doing these days. So I want to talk about this. Here I work in an organization that supports people to live whole lives. I support my staff to live whole lives. And if you looked at my life over the last, actually, couple of years, you would have seen that it wasn't really what I wanted it to be. If you ask my husband, Jeff, he would tell you loud and clearly, it hasn't been what I wanted it to be. He's a patient man. Partly it's just life circumstances. All of us will at one point deal with elder care. And that really threw some loops into my life. Being really present for my aging parents as they went through major life changes, and I lost my father and father-in-law. This is going to be something that I commit to doing and helping people do, but it is a very difficult time to balance work and life because it's very unpredictable. There's lots we could tell you about aging and working with people who have elder care responsibilities. We learned a lot as an organization around how to help people through that. But I also have learned, and think about the Great Resignation and what I'm about to say, having a really strong team that's all understanding what they needed to do and moving forward on their projects, and it's all working like a well-oiled machine, that makes my life so much easier. But ask any person who manages a team, and that the minute that happens for a minute, and that the rest of the hour or the rest of the week or month or year, it's a lot of work to get your team to be at that place. Not because my team was doing anything wrong. They were living their lives. I had someone go on parental leave. I had somebody else who needed to leave for other reasons. I had to hire somebody and onboard somebody. It's just an ongoing process, not to mention developing my board. So there is just the work of kind of putting that team in place that can really, I have another job I'm doing in addition to managing my team. And there's some other things too that have made it so that this last couple of years have not really been, did I mention the pandemic? I think that went through a loop to us too. So there's been a lot. And I guess I want to say this because, to be honest, I have had some challenges trying to figure this out the last few years. I had a really cool thing I did, which I'll talk about later in the webinar, that I think was a really good thing I stumbled across that made it better. But I wanted people to hear today and understand even experts face challenges trying to put these ideas into practice, and that therefore we can get mad at our organizations and we can get frustrated with bad bosses. And we can leave if we can have the agency to leave. And we can also develop some skills and some mindsets to reach for this wellness goal. Kyra, what would you add to that, and any insights from your own lives around this journey?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's so critical that we're transparent and honest about our own challenges, because how many panels have I sat in the audience and watched, leaders sitting on a panel talking about how they did it. And I'm like, oh, come on, could you just get real? So yeah, I have the same challenging life that everybody else does. I have children with mental health crises. I have children who haven't done well in school. One right now, we don't know if we're going to be empty nesters, or we've been empty nesters for 3 whole months. It might be coming to an end really quickly. So yeah, I've significantly reduced down my friend base. I had panic attacks on airplanes earlier this year. I continue to rethink and evolve my business every year. My husband and I went through lots of challenges, and I think our marriage was saved by COVID because we were both grounded. Neither one of us could travel anymore. And so, terrible. I lost my mother a year and a half ago. So terrible things happened to me as well. And I'm equally challenged, as we all are. I think for me, what I would share is that I have re-engineered my life in the last 5 or 6 years after a health event that I was lucky enough to be able to recover from. I just realized that I needed to live in alignment with who I was, what I believed in. I needed to take care of my body, and I needed to be investing myself in the relationships and the things that mattered the most to me. And that meant leaving my corporate career, selling my last business, and stepping into the great unknown. Every day, I ask myself throughout the day, what do I need? What does my body need? What does my heart need? What does my mind need? And that is the first thing that I think about in the morning. It's what I'm asking myself all day long. And it's what I'm reflecting on when I go to bed at night. And it doesn't mean that I always do it well, but it becomes the touchstone, because what I've learned after 21 years of marriage and a prior marriage that ended in divorce, children who have struggled in all kinds of various ways, is if I'm not asking those questions of myself and tending to those needs for myself, I am no good. And we always hear this sort of cliche, but literally, I won't show up in the way that I want to do the work that I want to do, to be the family member that I want to be, and to be able to come in integrity with all of you today. That doesn't mean it's easy, but that was the biggest shift for me, Jessica, was to actually put myself first and to be listening. If my stomach's grumbling, I don't care whether I got a deadline at 5 o'clock. I have to go get something to eat. If my hips are hurting from sitting too long, I'm going to get up and I'm going to stretch. And so this idea that we used to think about working hard and then playing hard, work time and then family time, and there's no time for me. Now we're afforded some of those options maybe we weren't before, because we're not commuting, not all of us. Some of us still are on shop floors and find it difficult to be able to manage all of this, especially our physical safety. But it starts with us. It starts with our mindset. It starts with believing that we have the right to put ourselves first.
Yeah, no, well said. I want to underscore, and then I'm going to switch to introducing our next speakers. Well said. Checking in with our bodies, checking in with our hearts, checking in with our minds. What a great centering way to kind of make sure that we're actually doing what we want to be doing. Really, thank you very much, Kyra. That was awesome. Really great explanation, both about what organizations need to do and what we can do. We have two more amazing panelists today to share some insights. Both of them are part of our ILA community, our Integrated Life Advocate community. They're the group that we turn to help us work with people one-on-one, help run our events. They are our backbone. And I'm really proud to have Karen Salinas here. Again, she's somebody who helps run our overwhelm mitigation groups, a great place for you to start learning work-life integration skills. And we also have Hoffman, someone who's got a long history of working around these issues. Both of them bring so much intelligence and wisdom to our conversation today. And if you go to our website, you'll see we've got some free resources for you to help you put some of these ideas into practice. One of them is what Kyra was talking about. If we want to have time for ourselves, our couples, or other fun things, we need a little bit of time for energy and breathing room. If we're rushing from one thing to the next and we have no energy or breathing room, we're going to have a hard time finding self and couple time and other fun things. Back to that concept, there's kind of 5 things that we think are really important for work-life integration and wellness. So I want to first hear from Karen and hear where we are with what do you think about what you've been hearing today? Karen, tell us a little bit about yourself, and thank you so much for being here today. We are so glad everybody's here today, and we're going to hear from Karen next about her thoughts about what we've been talking about. Tell us first, Karen, a little bit about the work that you do.
Thanks so much, and I'm so glad to be here. I feel like this particular topic I could discuss with everyone here for days. It's a really important part of my whole life and my experience. I worked in higher education for 30 plus years, and based on a little more of my story that I'll tell, I was forced to focus on my own health and wellness. And as a result, as I also healed, I got certified as a health and wellness coach. And so I have my own coaching practice called Rebalance Wellbeing. And it's just, in my mind, this very nice blending of work-life integration, well-being, and living a whole life and as a whole person.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. And when you heard us talk about some of the themes so far, did any resonate with you in particular?
Oh boy, did it. So I have a few notes that if I'm looking to my left, I'll just be referencing a little. I'm going to try to distill a really kind of 15 plus year medical odyssey to some high points that really relate to what we're talking about here today. So what happened? I struggled with Lyme disease for more than 15 years, partially because now with hindsight, I prioritized just the medical treatment part and not so much the recharge time, both physically and just as kind of you were mentioning, Kyra, there's the whole psychological part that comes with that kind of traumatic journey. I continued to work full time to 3 young and active children at the time, and I gave all my energy to work and wasn't able to meet my own or my family's expectations of everything that needed to happen at home. And, in reality, I don't think my job was in jeopardy. But, we've been firmly planted in this work first culture in the US, and they just got the best of me. In fact, my boss didn't even know that I had Lyme disease and that I was struggling with as much as I was until, in addition to the medical treatment that I was working through, I realized that I needed some of that psychological recharge time. And so the request that I made was to take some of my vacation time, 1 to 2 days a week, so that I could be at home when the rest of my family was at school and work, and I could just do whatever I needed for myself. And you're probably thinking, but what about FMLA? Well, this was all before that was a thing. And as my journey with Lyme disease continued, and I should also mention there was a divorce in all of that time, which did not help me mentally, physically, emotionally, all of that. But then I was able to take some FMLA time to cover doctor's appointments, and also to manage my workload a little bit better. So what's the personal clarity that I'd wished I'd had at the time? That I wish that I had not given all of my energy to work. There just was no reason. But that's the choice that I made. And I also wish I had asked for more help from my spouse and my children. My children were young, but I think I missed an opportunity to help them see me as a whole person. Instead, I just kind of continued to show up as supermom, superwoman. And I had a leadership opportunity that I now see that I wished I could have role modeled something a little different from them. So wrapping up, what's the personal clarity I have now? I can't and I won't do everything, especially at the expense of my health and wellness and a second marriage that I value tremendously. I manage my energy and not my time. Obviously, I have to do a little time management, but I really structure my day, my week, based on when my energy is the highest. I needed to learn, and it's never, again, another journey to set boundaries and to get to delegate, both at work and home. And those are two huge work-life integration skills that Third Path in particular really features and highlights. And then finally, I would just say that, I now know self-care is and making that time to recharge, it's a personal and professional responsibility. And I love what you said, Kyra, about teams and bosses are beginning to see, if we focus on well-being, we might actually be more efficient, more productive, and have higher results.
Oh, there is nothing I can add. Everything you said, from your story to what you underscored, was so on spot. So really, thank you for, I really do understand how much personal clarity is where it begins. And then pushing back at work is often where it happens next. So just a beautiful example of some of the things we're talking about. Carol, I'm feeling very lucky that you are here today, too. I'm guessing you have some thoughts, and again, I asked you guys to think a little bit about those key ingredients. I'm guessing you have some professional and personal experiences around some of those key ingredients of wellness. Tell us, Carol.
Right. Hi. So I founded and directed work life, employee assistance, mental health wellness programs. And so I've always tried to live by what my staff and I offered to the other employees. I figure if it worked for me, it might work for some others. And if it and what my needs were probably to others. I also got a lot of input from other people, of course, at the employees, not basing it just on my life, but I always wanted to make sure that I took advantage. So I was very fortunate in my positions because I was able to maximize flexibility and have sufficient resources to both get my work done and meet my personal needs outside of work. I know everyone does not have that same opportunity. But I also know that some people who don't take full advantage of their options to best enjoy life and maximize their physical, mental, emotional, and social health. So I'm going to speak a little bit about what I did to make it the right amount of work. Mostly I'm a consultant now, so I have more control, even more control over my time now, but I'll speak mostly to when I was a part-time or full-time employee. So I, like most people, always felt like I had too much work to do, more work than fit in the hours for which I was being paid. So I figured out if I did everything that I could do in my jobs, I would only be working. And that's not how I approach my paid work. I approach it as one aspect of my life. And so I did not want to compromise the time for my life outside of work more than was absolutely necessary. So I learned not to do some things that I would have liked to do, but couldn't if I wanted to keep the time available for exercise and parenting and elder caregiving and socialization and cultural activities and volunteer activities and everything else that we all like to do. So what did I do? Well, I'm speaking honestly here. I didn't, and I still don't, always read all my listservs, newsletters, and other social media, both from my field professionally outside of the workplace, as well as what was coming from within the workplace, as well as then the whole layer of personal, next door, all that social media stuff. So if you did it all, you could do it 24/7, right? So I browse sometimes to see a topic. So if I had to be more involved with that topic, I could come back to that. But I unfortunately didn't do that. I also didn't always go to all events, both in the community professionally as well as within my workplace. It would be relevant, but not necessary. And so I gave up some of that. I also was not a good workplace housekeeper. I didn't always file my documents. The things weren't always neat and tidy. I didn't put everything away at the end of the day. I sort of tried to keep my eye on the big picture because those details of daily living would take care of me personally to have a nice environment around me and other things that I value, but it wouldn't have moved the work forward. It wasn't going to meet my bigger goals. And so just like some people choose not to keep their house in perfect condition at all times, because that's the place where they can maybe compromise to use the time for other wellness kinds of things. I also always made sure that everything that I worked on and still do to some extent has more than one purpose or goal to be worthy of my time. If it was a one-off situation that wasn't going to lead to anything further or have some other secondary benefit, I wouldn't take it on or go to it, attend it, or read it, or whatever. I always wanted to make sure things were forward moving, not just one-off at that moment. And I also, we talked a little bit about this, one of the other speakers, but I constantly reprioritize. It can drive people around me a little crazy where I say, this is what I'm doing today, and then I change what I'm doing today. But I reprioritize all the time because I want to make sure I'm doing what I want to be doing, both at work and at home. And so I'm also very deadline driven. If I don't have a deadline, it probably is not going to happen. And if it's not going to happen, maybe it wasn't important enough to happen in the first place. Sometimes I would have to generate some deadlines for myself, but not arbitrary deadlines, something real. But otherwise, I knew I would not do that. And I would think about like, okay, what has to get done today? What has to be done by tomorrow? When do I have to do the things that are due deadline for tomorrow? Does it have to be in the middle of the workday, or could it be at night or in the morning or on weekends or whatever? So I'm not advocating for working outside of work hours, whatever that means in terms of remote work or flexible work. But I'm saying that some things are better done at other times, and don't have to be handled within the workday. So if I could leave work earlier to pick up my son, knowing I can do what I didn't finish later that night or early the next morning, that would be my priority, is picking up my son when he was young, at his activities. I also knew myself. I'm not a night person. I'm also thinking I'm not a morning person either anymore, but I have never been a night person. And so I'd get to a certain point at the end of the workday that even if I had something more I had to do for the next day, I couldn't do it. And I would just do anything else in home, even if it was things like cooking or cleaning or anything that would clear my head from work. And it would refresh me, never mind doing something like going to a movie or whatever. So, and so I quickly learned that I could somewhat guess the right amount of time I would need for that work to be done, and get up earlier the next morning when I'd be refreshed, ready to dig in, not have my mind filled with 20 other things, just be able to focus on getting that done. So,
wow.
Yeah. So I was just going to say one last thing, that I felt like I would, I did this prioritization because every day, similar to what Kyra was saying, that I wanted to make sure that I felt fine about what I did that day. That if I was to die in my sleep that night, I would have felt fine about my prioritization of my life in the big picture, as well as my work and personal and well-being activities each day. So that's always been important to me.
Wonderful. I have fantasies that maybe I'm going to get Karen and Carol to write up their comments as blog posts that we can put up on our website, because you guys just shared so much wisdom in your stories. They were fantastic. I'm also noticing, as I look around us for today's town hall, that we have a nice sized group. So I'm going to explain a little bit in a second about what happens in our town halls. And what we're going to do in a town hall, I'll make sure this part is recorded so people know for future town halls what happens. But then when we have the conversation that's part of the town hall, it won't actually be recorded. So this will be a chance for our Third Path community to come together and talk about what they've heard without any worries that what they've said becomes part of our monthly webinar that's recorded. But what we're trying to do on these town halls, and we'll be having another town hall in February, is after you've heard from these amazing speakers today, you, the participants, then get a chance to share your thoughts. And we've got a pretty cool method for doing that, where we actually get, again, the goal is an interactive conversation. Wow, that was an amazing conversation. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your insights. I have fostered an amazing community, the Third Path community. I really appreciate you joining us today and participating in this amazing town hall. I learned so much. And as you can see on the screen today, thanks to Kyra's wonderful work, we're going to be able to share a couple of her books with our audience today. So we'll make sure to get those books out to our winners. And I want to just put up a couple closing slides to then give a chance to our speakers to share one last thought. So, Karen, we had a pretty amazing conversation, started off with your amazing story. What's one last closing thought? And then we'll hear from Carol.
Here's my closing thought. Realize that you have choices. You can take charge of them. Doesn't mean it'll be easy. Doesn't mean you won't need a lot of courage or to be brave, but this is your life, and you get to take charge of your choices and decide what you want your work and your home life to be like. And there's help out there if if you need it and can't figure that all out on your own. There's lots of support.
In fact, there's help in wonderful people like you, Karen. So thank you for that wonderful insight. Carol, one closing thought before we give Kyra the last word.
Just that, everyone always, historically, has always talked about, like, on your deathbed, do you regret not spending more hours at work, or do you regret not spending more time with your family and friends and participating in activities that you're passionate about, your hobbies or whatever? So I just try to keep that in mind, to prioritize what's most important. And personally, fortunately, I don't like shopping. So I'll go for a walk any day over going shopping. So it solves many problems at one time.
That's wonderful, wonderful. And, again, what a wonderful list. You gave us some concrete ideas about really how to tame our workloads in a smart way, where our workplaces benefit from those changes. Kyra, I want to give you the last word. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. It's been such an important conversation for me to be a part of, and mostly the listening part where I've been able to learn from all of you. So thank you. I grew up not knowing, believing, or understanding that my voice, that little inner voice inside of me, knows the path, knows the right path. And so learning to cultivate a relationship with that inner self has been critical to me being able to live out this more integrated life. And well-being comes in moments. It's no longer a Caribbean vacation, if we even ever had one. So finding moments to cultivate that quiet connection and build that relationship with ourselves so that we know the path to follow will pay dividends long into the future for you and for the people around you. Thank you so much. It's a journey for sure.
Oh, wow. That inner voice, that is really getting at the heart of it. So thank you, everybody. This has really been a fabulous start to something we need to keep on committing to, which is work-life integration and wellness. And I really just appreciate all your insights. If you want to keep the conversation going, follow us on social media and tune in next month when we have another Thursday with Third Path webinar.